Good morning. How's everyone doing? This is a little bit of a homecoming for me. I am from New York City. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I am a SUNY Brockport graduate. That's usually not, when I say that, it's usually no sound at all. When I travel around the world, I'm like, I'm from SUNY Brockport. And this is what I usually hear. So it's exciting for me to be back, and I want to talk a little bit about learning and education and celebrate really what you guys have been able to accomplish here over the last, how long has it been now? 3 years that you guys have been working on this. So I'm excited to be here, excited that you guys are having this day. And I want to kind of kick things off with some contact information. There's a hashtag, and I already forgot the hashtag. It's hashtag RHDLD is the hashtag. So whether you are on Twitter, which is a great tool for educators, Google+, I also write a blog on education, but it's a great way to keep conversations going. It's a great way to ask questions, to talk about things, to share resources and information. So for those of you who aren't spending a lot of time on Twitter, there's a flock of educators, both on Google+ and on Twitter, that are using various hashtags to communicate and share information and resources. I've been at Google for 9 years. Just keep in mind as we talk and think about this, is that when I graduated at SUNY Brockport, there was no Google, right? So I'm working in a job that didn't exist. So if we think about the future and our kids and what we're trying to do with our kids, just have that in mind, that I couldn't think about working at Google when I graduated college. I've been there for 9 years, and I've been working in education for most of that time. I launched Google Apps for Education into the university space when we signed Arizona State University 9 years ago, whenever that was. Launched Google Apps into K-12. A couple years after that, we signed the state of Oregon, and today we have close to 45 million users using Google Apps in education around the world. And then I'm also part of the Chromebook team and the Android team, and I launched Chromebooks in education when everyone made fun of me when I did that 3 years ago, I think it was now, 4 years ago. So I've been involved in education from a Google perspective for a long time. My job at Google is to work across all the various teams to be an advocate for education, to make sure that we're building tools that make sense in education, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But also to be external and be the face and the voice of what we're doing in education, and to be able to, answer questions, be able to talk about what we see, talk about what we're working on, those types of things. So just some good contact information for you guys to share. I also want to plug Education on Air. You guys are going to have a great learning day today. We are also having a virtual conference on May 8th and 9th, and that you can just go online, do g.co/edu on air, and you can register, and just show up to a whole bunch of different sessions that we're having by Google certified teachers, by experts. We have people like Laszlo Bach, who's going to do a keynote. I'm going to participate in it as well. Chris Lehman from Science Leadership Foundation. We have a whole bunch of people that are going to be participating in this, so I wanted to make sure you saw that. So just because you want more professional development than what you're getting today, here's an opportunity to get some free stuff that we have online. So I promised the team that I would plug that. All right, so all my plugging is done. Why are we here, right? Why didn't you guys call in sick today? All right, it's because we recognize the power and the potential that education has, right? We understand that education is what changes the world. We understand that education is what has the capacity to change lives for generations. For me personally, this was true because I am a first-generation American. I was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York, right? And not the Hell's Kitchen today with all the nice restaurants that you go down to, but the one in the 70s and 80s, with the brochure said neighborhoods that you should never go into, and Hell's Kitchen was one of those. That Hell's Kitchen, right? This is a picture of PS 111 where I went to school. And my mother came from Argentina. I was born in Hell's Kitchen. I showed up at PS 111. They said, "Welcome to PS 111," and I said, "¿Qué?" So I had to learn English. grew up on welfare and food stamps and all the things that a lot of our students have to deal with in those environments. And education was my way out. I did not like that community. I did not like that neighborhood. And I wanted out of that. And so I saw two ways out. One was to play in the NBA. And none of you have ever seen me play basketball. I don't know why you're laughing. It was possible. It's still my dream. And the other, it was to get my education. And so despite all the odds, I graduated high school. I went to SUNY Brockport, left SUNY Brockport, and went to ASU, and realized that it was a lot warmer in Tempe, Arizona than it is in Rochester. So I stayed there, and that's where I live today. But education was my silver bullet. Education disrupts poverty. That's the power and the potential that education has. And for those of you who are teachers, I'm here to tell you that it's not just for the students that you have in your class, that it goes beyond that. Because now I have 3 kids, and I have a 22-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 7-month-old. So I don't like kids very much. I can only deal with one at a time. And my 22-year-old is about to graduate college. And we never talked about it. Never came up in conversation. We never talked about the fact that she should go to college. I never had to push college on her. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college, because her mother went to college, because everyone in her life went to college. She assumed she's going to graduate school because I went to graduate school. And she assumes I'm paying for that. But that's a good problem to have, right? I got the chance to go to graduate school. I went to ASU. She's at ASU. She wants to go to graduate school. She's got a whole bunch of things lined up, and no one told her that she had to go to college. She just assumed she was going to college. My 13-year-old, my problem with him is that, he doesn't want to go to high school, right? And he throws his 13th grade reading level and his 14th grade math level in my face as proof that he doesn't need high school, right? Which is another reason why I hate assessments. But and my 7-month-old is going to be the most spoiled child in the history of children. Their perspective of the world, their view is so fundamentally different than it was for me. Right? That what's possible in life for them is only possible because of the teachers that I had in my school. And that's the power that you have in education. That's the power that you have for your students in your classroom. It goes beyond your students that you have in your classroom. Now, we like to talk about education, and I hear a lot of rhetoric around education is broken, we need to fix education, we need to transform education. You hear these words. And I don't like to start from that perspective. Because if you think about it, education isn't broken. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And it's doing it better than it ever has before. Graduation rates are up. Graduation rates for minorities are up. Graduation rates for different classes of people, we're in the 80 percentile compared to 10% what it was in 1910. The content that we're teaching students in our classes is 10x, 100x than it was in 1900. Education is doing amazing work, and it has so for the last 150 years. I don't like to look at education and say we need to fix education. What we should be doing instead is asking ourselves, just like we did 150 years ago when we created the education system for that environment, for that economy, we have to ask ourselves, do we have the right education system for the new economy? Right? For what's coming, for the networked economy, for the knowledge-based economy. Do we have the right education model for that? And that's all we need to ask is, what do we need to tweak? What do we need to fix? What do we need to turn around so that we can make sure that what we're doing is preparing our kids for the jobs of the future, for the careers of the future, for lifelong learning in what they need? That's what we should be asking ourselves. In 1973, 28% of the jobs required some kind of post-secondary education. By the time we get to 2020, it's going to be close to 60%. In 2020, there's going to be a shortage of about 1 million computer science position, people with degrees in computer science to fill jobs and positions and roles that are going to be available in computer science, right? We can understand that the future requires more than just a high school graduation. It requires some kind of post-secondary learning, and we recognize that. And that's what we need to build towards. Now, for most of history, where you were born, the family you were born into, the proximity that you had to books and libraries, these all determined your academic success. And this was true in my lifetime. This is inside the Columbus Library on 51st Street and 10th Avenue in New York. This was my resource center. This is where I had to go get information. This is where I had to go and find the work that I needed so I can write my papers and do the group work and all the other things that we were doing in high school. This library was the only library for the entire community, for every school in that community, for every citizen who lived there. And it closed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and basketball practice, went on till 4:45. It wasn't open on the weekends. And when I finally found the book that I was looking for through the card catalog and went to go find a book, 9 times out of 10, the book wasn't there because some other kid decided to do their report on hummingbirds as well, right? That was my experience. Today, we have 100 million Columbus libraries at our fingertips. We have all the world's information at our fingertips, and no one is freaking out about this, right? Nothing's really shifted because of this. And we have to ask ourselves why. Why does my 13-year-old's classroom look the same as my classroom did 100 years ago when I was in 8th grade, when the world has fundamentally shifted? How do we take advantage of having 100 million Columbus libraries at our fingertips? How do we take advantage of having all the world's information at our fingertips? That's what we should be asking ourselves. Are we preparing our kids with the right tools for the future? Now, we've been talking about technology in education forever. This is not the first time we were talking about this. First, it was motion pictures. Television was going to revolutionize education. And we've been talking about computers since the 60s, right? I remember taking a computer class when I was in 8th grade or 9th grade. And because computers were going to be important in my future. And I took a programming class. I learned how to program in BASIC. And I wrote about 900 lines of code to make a bird fly across a screen on a Commodore 64. Right? That was my experience. So we've been talking about technology in education forever. So what's different this time? Why are things heating up in this space? Well, I'm going to propose 3 things. The first is all the information, research, and evidence that we have about what real learning could look like and what it should look like. How it can be engaging and relevant, how we can personalize it, how we can make it student-centric. We haven't had the opportunity to do these things for the most part over the last 30 years because we haven't had the tools. Now we have the tools. We have the tools to be able to customize. We have the tools to be able to personalize. We have the tools that we need to create the learning environments that we've been wanting to create for the last 30 years. We have all this research, all this evidence. We need to start taking advantage of that. So that's 1. 2, the way in which technology has wrapped itself around the core of our lives and we haven't even noticed. How many of you have not used technology today? It's 9 o'clock in the morning. What's wrong with you people? How many of you have not used the web today? A couple of you lost your phones, you left them at home? Most of us are on the internet using technology the moment we wake up in the morning, right? We still have crusties in our eyeballs and we're pulling out our phones and checking our emails and doing different things. How long did that take to become such a part of your life? The iPhone is 7 years old. The BlackBerry, which is a dinosaur, is 12 years old. Do you remember we used to have to call the internet? No, seriously, we used to have to place a phone call to the internet. And the internet was busy. Hi, you've reached the internet. I can't talk to you right now. If you call me back later. Or it would hang up on you, right? And what was your reward when you finally got through? It was a bunch of pages that had words on it with links to other pages that had words, and you were so excited about that. And every once in a while, somebody would post a picture, and you'd be like, oh my God, there's a picture coming. I have to wait 20 minutes, but there's a picture coming. And as you're waiting for this picture, somebody walked into the kitchen and picked up the yellow phone on the wall and knocked you off the internet, and you lost your mind. And today, what's our expectation? That wasn't that long ago. I've seen teachers who I adore, the nicest, most patient, most understanding people in the world, do a job that I could never do. I teach at college level, and I can barely stand those kids. And I've seen the nicest teachers in the world turn into a mob at education conferences when the Wi-Fi wasn't good enough. Even me, when I think about this, I stopped using the Wi-Fi on airplanes because I was frustrated with how slow it is while I'm traveling at 35,000 feet and 535 miles an hour. It's too slow for me. Our expectation has changed about technology and how it's wrapped itself around the core of our lives. And if that's true for us, what does that mean for a generation of students that don't know that the world existed before Google? A generation of students who don't know that the world existed before smartphones and tablets and even Wi-Fi, right? We still think we go somewhere is there going to be Wi-Fi there? Kids don't think that. They just assume that it'll be there and then are shocked when you take them to that cabin somewhere, and there is no Wi-Fi and they lose their minds. Right? This generation of students is different than we are. They're growing up with technology as part of their lives. Why don't we take advantage of that? They don't know any better, right? Now, it's important to point out that I'm not saying that this generation is different than we are in that they have evolved in a different way than we have, right? And I would be cautious and wary of people who say, this generation of students are built different than we are. Their brains are wired differently. They can do 4 things at the same time, and no, they can't. They do 4 things at the same time poorly, just like we do 4 things at the same time. They are no different than we are. But how they think about learning is different. And that's something that we have to continuously remind ourselves of. A couple years ago, we went on our family vacation, and we went to Hawaii. Never been before, so we took the kids to Hawaii, and my daughter hates to fly, the 22-year-old. Hates it. Terrified of it, don't know why. It has no logic behind it. And flying over water is just her worst nightmare in the world. And so like any good parent, I had to come up with a strategy to take her to Hawaii, and so I drugged her up and bribed her. And said, when we get to Hawaii, you can get your ukulele, because that's what she wanted. She wanted a ukulele. She's a musician. She plays instruments. She loves different things, and very creative person, and so she wanted a ukulele. We went to the ukulele store when we landed and went to go buy her a ukulele. And we're leaving the ukulele store, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye instruction books and videos on how to play the ukulele. And I said, hey, because we just bought a real ukulele, not one of those $10 ones that you find in those stores, but a real one, like $100 ukulele. And I said, do you want instruction books and videos on how to play the ukulele? And she looked at me with such disdain, oh my God, I don't know you at all kind of look. Why? How is she going to learn how to play ukulele? And we block it in schools, right? And so we think about that my kid is going to learn through YouTube, that they're going to think about learning in a different way than we think about learning. Because I grew up with somebody teaching me things. I grew up with going and getting a book or a video or something, where she's growing up thinking about learning in a different way. This is my 13-year-old who's showing me all on his own that he's learning how to code in Java, and he's showing me his lines of code that he created for a game he plays called Minecraft. And this is last year, and he shows me this line of code because he needs to create mods that he can't create on his own. He needed to learn how to code, so he taught himself how to code. Never brought it up to me, never came up, never said, I wonder if there's a class I can go take on learning how to code. Oh, I wonder if, there's someone who can teach me how to code. No, he just went online, searched coding in Java, and taught himself how to code. They think about learning in a different way than we think about learning, and we have to continuously keep that in mind. Because this generation is different than we are in that sense, where they have technology as part of their core lives, right? And that's okay, and they get a bad rap for that, right? We get this generation is disconnected, this generation can't look in your eyeballs and shake your hands, and all these other things that are absolutely ridiculous. We have to keep in mind that what we're doing is we're saying, this rock and roll stuff is bad for our kids. And we're just repeating that. So we have to always keep in mind, how do we take advantage of using technology as part of their everyday lives? And so when I talk to students and we think about the skills that they need for this future, I try to talk to students as much as I possibly can in big auditoriums and classrooms, wherever I get a chance, over a hangout. And I try to get a message of thinking about the skills that they need to prepare themselves for the future, no matter what they end up doing. Because one of the things that I cringe about is when someone asks my 13-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? I get that question all the time. What do you want to be? He gets all that question all the time. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I cringe, because there's a good chance that his job doesn't exist yet, right? And also, it gives that kind of, where do you want to go work? Like, who do you want to go work for? And so instead of asking them what you want to be when you grow up, I ask students, what problem do you want to solve? Right? What problem spins in your head? And by the way, it doesn't have to be solving the world's problems. It doesn't have to be solving climate change. It doesn't have to be solving world hunger. It doesn't have to be those things. It can simply be, making cars go faster, or making vacuum cleaners quieter, right? Or making blenders quieter, which is a problem I need somebody to desperately solve. Because my wife gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays and goes hiking, and she makes herself one of those stupid shakes and wakes me up. It's a personal problem, but a problem nonetheless, right? And so what problem do you want to solve spins the question in a different way for kids, because we've gone from who do you want to go work for to what problem do you want to solve? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to solve that problem? Where do you get those knowledge, skills, and abilities? What classes can you take? What online classes can you take? What blogs should you be reading? What websites should you be going to? What videos should you be watching? Who should you be following on Twitter and LinkedIn and so on and so on and so on? What journals should you be reading? It changes the question. We go from who do you want to go work for to building the magic triangle of motivation, right? We're building autonomy, purpose, and mastery. And so it changes the question for students when we ask them what problem you want to solve. By the way, this works with adults as well. Right? When someone comes up to you and says, hey, I don't know, I need to change my career, I don't know what I want to do. You ask them that question, and they go away for 3 days and come back to you later with their answer. Because most people that I know, I don't even like the phrase college and career ready, to be honest with you. Because most people that I know who aren't in education, by the way, so we have an interesting view, because we're here on a day to learn, right? Most people that I know don't like their jobs, right? I don't want to prepare kids for that. I want to prepare kids to be lifelong learners. I want to prepare them to solve problems. I want them to care about what they're doing. So we want to make sure we're building our skills for our students. And their capacity is amazing. This is a picture of our science fair winners from last year. And what I love about this shot is one of the big winners, the girl there in the middle that's holding the yellow trophy, she was an average student. Wasn't, some brainiac, genius kid. She was an average student, but in her social network, she had a friend in the Philippines who couldn't read, couldn't study at night because they didn't have electricity, so she couldn't read. And so she went and invented a flashlight that's powered by the heat of the human hand. This is a 16-year-old. Their capacity to think about problems in a different way is something that we should be taking advantage of. The second thing, it looks like we lost this one here. They're working on it. Okay, so it's up here. So the second thing that I talk to students about is this idea of iteration, right? We like to say we need to teach our kids how to fail. I don't like the word failure. Mostly because it's got an opposite word, which is success, right? So you either fail or you succeed, and we don't live in that world. We live in a world of continuous iteration, continuous change, and you learn from both failure and successes. We're constantly changing things. If you used Google last night and then used it again today, there's a good chance you use a different version of Google, because we update Google about 600 times a year. For those of you who use Google Apps in your classroom or use Classroom in part as Google Apps in your classroom, you know how many times we change Google Apps. The IT administrators usually, I can always tell who the IT administrator is because they're always looking at me like, oh, you're from Google. Because we update Google Apps 250 times a year, and they get all frustrated with me. We're constantly changing, constantly iterating. We need to teach our kids how to iterate. One of my favorite teachers in the world, Esther Wojcicki, who's in Palo Alto, I call her my adopted mother. She teaches a journalism class at Palo Alto High, and she's got a 1-to-70 ratio. She's got 70 students in her journalism class. And she's been doing it for 30 years, and she's never given out a grade that wasn't an A. Right? And the reason why she only gives out A's is because she doesn't give out any grades throughout the year. She gives feedback, right? A kid creates something, they bring it to her, she writes it up, doesn't put any letters on it, and then hands it back to the kid. And then they work on it and then hand it back, and she keeps editing it. And she keeps editing it until it becomes an A. Right? This whole constant iteration. Because if you think about it, doesn't that make sense in a real world? Right? Like imagine somebody on my team handing me a document or a paper, and I look at it and going, that's about a C work. Thank you, I appreciate that. Wouldn't I hand it back to them and have them fix it and iterate it and keep changing it? That's what we do in the real world. So we need to teach our kids how to iterate, that there is no success, there is no failure, there is only continuous iteration, and that's the world of the knowledge economy and the network economy that we live in. We also need to teach our kids how to really collaborate. We say collaboration in education all the time, but we don't really mean it. Because education is designed as a single-player sport. But the problem is we live in a team-based world, right? It's my 13-year-old who takes a test. It's my 13-year-old who does homework. It's my 13-year-old who has assignments. It's my 13-year-old who graduates, and we say, okay, go work with others, good luck. Imagine as teachers in an 8th grade classroom, you hand out your typical test. Doesn't matter the subject. You hand out a test, and you sit up front, and at the end of the test, 2 kids come up to you holding the test together, saying, we decided to combine our skill set and work on this together. What would your reaction be? And imagine that in my world, where I go to Larry and Sergey, the founders of Google, and say, here is the education strategy. I did it all by myself. No, I swear, I did not talk to any of the other teams. I did not get their input. No, this is all my stuff. It doesn't work in that world. So we need to teach our kids how to really collaborate, that their part is part of a greater sum. And I don't mean group work, by the way. You know, I often talk to students, and I talked to an honors college class a couple weeks ago, and one of the students said, you know, I always hated the collaboration work because I was the kid who did all the work, and the other 3 kids didn't do any of the work, and I had to, you know, you get that response all the time. And my pushback to her was that you weren't doing collaboration work. What you were doing was you were working on a paper that could have been done by one person that was split up among 3 or 4 people. There's a difference between collaboration and group work, right? Real collaboration is that you recognize that your part is part of a greater sum that you're working on together, right? Real collaboration is the ability to ask really good questions and to listen. right? Real collaboration is the ability to change your mind based on evidence and data and facts, right? We need to teach our kids how to collaborate. My daughter, I mentioned, is about to graduate from college. She's in the film program, and they had their capstone program. They're working on a film all year. And a month ago, they had to submit their final drafts of a video. And my daughter got an A, and none of the other students did. And they were all complaining about it on their Facebook page that they've created together, and my daughter couldn't participate in that conversation because, she would be shunned from the group if she talked about her A with the other kids in her class. We make kids compete against each other in school, and then we put them into the world and they have to work together. It doesn't make any sense. So we really need to focus on real collaboration. Inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, those types of things are really critical. And then we also need to make sure that we're creating digital leaders. Digital citizenship is the minimum requirement for the new economy, right? Just because they're born in this time doesn't mean that they are digital leaders. They might know technology, they might understand it, but how do you really take advantage of it? How to analyze information, how to make sense of information, how to vet. How many of you have ever taken an advanced search class? Right? Most of us are terrible searchers. I know, I've seen the logs. The things that people search for are mind-blowing. Facebook.com, I'm searching for that. Or, just a self-assessment for yourself. If you type a question mark into the search bar, or even an actual question, you're a bad searcher. You're using too many words, right? So if we're bad searchers, what does that mean for our kids? Where are they going to learn how to look for information and vet information and verify information? Last week or the week before, I was watching the Today Show in the background, and the story was about girls who bought prom dresses that were not official. They were, fake prom dresses. And they were all upset that they bought their fake prom dresses. Who's teaching them how to look and vet websites and make sure that they're legitimate sites? Who's teaching them how to make sense of all the world's information and how to look for things? Right? How do we teach them to be digital leaders? How they post online, what they post online, how they share videos, and all the other things, like real important skill set, because this is here to stay. Right? And again, this is one of my favorite pictures that I found on the internet because it really highlights the whole, are we really giving our kids a fair shake when it comes to technology? Because that doesn't look like it was very social, back in the good old days. Right? Now, the good news is that as teachers, you no longer have to be the Google in the room. We're freeing you from that. Right? It made sense that you used to have to be, because when I was in school and you asked me as a teacher what happened on December 7th, 1941, and the significance of that date, I would say, and I didn't know, I'd say, I'll be back tomorrow. I'll let you know. Right? And I had to go ask someone, or I had to go look in an encyclopedia. And, hang on, is there any? An encyclopedia is a printed version of Wikipedia. Anyway, we no longer have to do that. For example, I saw a couple months ago that 7% of Americans can name you the first 4 presidents of the United States in a row, right? And who the first 4 presidents are. Ooh, there was a vibe change in the room. Because some of you look nervous, some of you all of a sudden start looking down, and somebody's pointing at somebody else. You're afraid I could ask you to name me the first 4 presidents of the United States. And I can point at one of you, especially here in the leadership section, to name me the first 4 presidents of the United States. And if you don't know, for the rest of the day, you're going to be the person who didn't know who the first 4 presidents are, and people are going to make fun of you when they walk by you, even though they didn't know who the first 4 presidents were. Or I can give all of you 30 seconds, and all of you can tell me who the first 4 presidents are. Information becomes a commodity. Information has no value. What is valuable is what we do with that information. How do we help our students take information and convert it into intelligence? That's our job. How do we help them make sense of that information? How do we make them make sense of that information and convert it into something that's knowledgeable, something that's original? So it's not who are the first 4 presidents, it's who are the first 4 presidents and how did they work together? What legislation did they all believe in? What was their legacy to each other? The deeper understanding questions that we should be asking our students, that's what we need to focus on. Now, we're starting to see really good progress, right? You guys are here working on some cool things. You're spending the day learning how to integrate technology in education. We're starting to see new learning models pop up everywhere, right? More student-centric models like blended learning, flipped classrooms, inquiry-based learning, project-based learning. Really cool things are happening, and technology helps us enable and support those new learning models, and that's really exciting. So we have to continue that. And I always talk to the leadership team of any school district and say, what we need to do is make sure that we're giving our teachers the space to iterate, to experiment, to try different things, to see what works, to see what doesn't work, and iterate and move from that. We're starting to see that. We're also starting to see more of a push to make sure that we support our teachers with professional development and the space that we need. Reverse some of the things that we've done terribly wrong to teachers over the last couple of years. Right? Because at the end of the day, when the door closes, nothing is more important to a kid's education than having a great teacher in that classroom. I remember my 4th grade teacher who taught me how to write, my 6th grade teacher who taught me how to be creative, my 9th grade teacher who showed me math in a completely different way, and one of my graduate teachers is actually here, who lives in Rochester. She came to see me today, and one of my mentors, and she taught me how to be creative in a completely different way in graduate school. By the way, she is the executive director of the Seneca Park Zoo, and she said that today only you can go and take selfie pictures with the polar bears. No, that wasn't, no. She said, okay, you can do that, but you're on your own. I'm here I hear this fear all the time that technology is going to replace teachers. I'm here to publicly say that technology will never replace teachers. Right? I work for one of the most innovative companies in the world, and I do not report to a laptop. I report to a real person who's a coach, who empowers me, who pushes me, who knows my strengths, knows my areas that I need to work on, helps me find the areas where I need to collaborate, helps me focus, pulls me back when he needs to pull me back. Right? And that's what we need our teachers to be. People who empower students, people who facilitate, people who coach, people who mentor. Now, if all we do in education is have kids memorize a bunch of things and then test them to see if they memorize those things, yes, technology can do that. But if we really want our students to be lifelong learners, if we really want them to understand and build skills around problem solving and critical thinking and iteration and collaboration, a laptop will never do that, right? So we want to make sure that we're building the skills that teachers need. And days like today are days where you're learning that skill set that you need to help our kids thrive. The bad news, if you will, and I think it's the good news, is that there is no magic button to any of this. There is no push here and education will look exactly the way you want it to look. There is no, show me a school district that's doing it, I'll just do exactly what they're doing. That doesn't exist. Because what we need more than anything in education is a culture of iteration and innovation. Right? A culture of continuous improvement that we don't necessarily worry about what other schools are doing, that we're just worried about one classroom at a time and the iteration and innovation that's happening in our schools, in our classrooms. And that we're always changing. Right? Here's a picture of the original Google.com. This is what it looked like. So this is Larry and Sergey putting a bunch of machines together. and trying searching in a different way. Created a program called Backrub, launched Google, and this is what it looked like when it started. This is what a row of servers at Google looks like today. Right? Now, a couple of things to point out here. First, this is not what Google looked like on Monday, and then this is what it looked like on Thursday. This took 15 years of the same stuff I'm talking about. Problem solving, collaboration, critical thinking, innovation, all the things that we're talking about that we need in education. Also important to point out, or even more important to point out, is that this is not what a data center will look like 15 years from today. Like the little kid said in the Matrix, there is no spoon. There is no data center. If this is what a data center looks like 15 years from today, we're not going to be in existence, right? We are continuously changing it, continuously iterating, continuously innovating, and that's what we need more than anything in education. Now, I talked a little bit about technology in education, but it's also important to point out that technology is not the silver bullet. I did not start off by saying that. I said that education is a silver bullet. What technology is an amazing enabling and supporting capability for that great learning. Right? It is there to support and enable. It's not there to drive anything. It's there to use as a tool. And that what we really need is that culture of innovation and iteration and changing and constantly asking ourselves, is this the right thing? And then using technology to support that. Our job as technologists is to make sure that we're building tools that are easy to use, that are manageable, that are scalable, that become invisible to you. Right? Just like we walked into this gym and expected the lights to just turn on, we walk into our classroom and expect the lights to turn on. Imagine you walked into your classroom and you flicked on the lights and they flickered for a while and then they went on 15 minutes later, and then in the middle of your lesson they just shut off, and then you have to go and reflick them again, and then at some point they just stopped altogether and you have to call someone to come fix your light bulbs. And how long before you just don't even turn the lights on anymore? Right? Our job is to be those lights. Our job is to just be there, to be invisible, to work. And if we're not doing that, let us know. Let me know. Our job is to continuously do that. For those of you using Classroom, how many of you are using Classroom in your classes? Awesome. For those of you using Classroom, there was no, if you noticed, there was no instruction book on how to use Classroom. Right? We just launched it, and we try to make it as simple as we could so that you can just start using it with little, training, if you will. That's our job. That's what we want to make sure that we're focused on. And the other thing to keep in mind is that we are just getting started. If you are a teacher or administrator, and most likely that's what you are, or you're completely at the wrong place, you are the generation of teachers and administrators that are creating what the future of learning looks like, whether you like it or not. Right? And maybe you don't recognize that because you are at the very beginning of it. In 1995, 1% of the world was online. It took 10 years to get to the first billion people. It took 5 years to get to the second billion, and 4 years to get to the third billion. But even with all that, there's still only 40% of the world's population that's online. So we are just getting started. This is a picture, that's me hiding in the back there. This is a picture of a school that I am part of in Phoenix. It's the construction of the school. It's going to be called the Phoenix Code Academy. And what we're doing is we're building a school from scratch in a school district, not a charter school, not a magnet school, a real school, that's going to be an inquiry-based school, but it's focused on coding as the baseline language that students learn in that school, right? And we're building it in a low-income school district in Phoenix where we're hopefully going to reach low-income Latino kids and teach them how to code so that they graduate high school with 2 or 3 different languages that they can code in already, right? This stuff is happening everywhere, all over the country, all over the world. We are just getting started. So I want to leave you with this kind of closing thought. I want you to think about, I asked you at some point, how many of you have not used technology? I want you to think about the technology that you have, right? Whether it's a smartphone, your iPad, your Chromebook, whatever technology you have, right? For me, it's, this, what my wife calls a mini tablet, 6-inch Nexus phone that's like brand new. And then I want you to think about a 5-year-old. And then I want you to think about that technology against that 5-year-old and realize that that 5-year-old is looking at the worst technology they'll ever see in their life. This is it. This is their Commodore 64. They're going to find this in a thrift store in the 50-cent box, and they're going to buy it because they want to hang it on their wall like a museum piece in 20 years. And they're going to say, oh, I remember, my dad used to have one of these. And they're going to reminisce and look how heavy it is. And they're going to think about this device. And then they're going to realize, because they remember things, they're 5 years old, and they're going to realize, they're going to say, oh, and they're going to laugh for 10 minutes. And they're going to say, he used to have to plug this into the wall every day. Those are the 5-year-olds who are coming into our school systems next year. Are we ready for them? Do we have the right infrastructure for them? Are we going to help them build the skills that they need to thrive around problem solving and critical thinking and collaboration for this new economy that we need to build an education to reflect? We have to ask ourselves, are we working hard enough to build that environment for those students so that when they graduate, when they get through 12th grade, that they're ready for that economy, they're ready for that world that's in front of them? Thank you guys very much for having me. I appreciate your time.